Welcome. Great to have you and great to be here with you today. We are in such a beautiful building and a beautiful space, and I can't wait to tell you and show you more screen pics of this beautiful, beautiful space. I'm Trilla Ray Carter. I'm director of the Kansas City Baroque Consortium, but we like to go by KC Baroque. It's a little more friendly and easier to say. We're playing an excerpt from the Christmas Concerto by Arcangelo Corelli, and you'll get to hear more of this in just a few minutes. But first, I want just to do a very special thank you to your teachers, Jonathan Wiebe, Anna Cook, and Curtis Melvenin, for inviting us to be a part of such a fantastic project. We just love this idea. We love getting to participate in it, and we hope to get to do some more. I also want to thank the Country Club Christian Church. They have really gone beyond the call of duty and making this possible, allowing us to use their recording equipment and their amplification equipment, their YouTube link. They've set all of this up in-house for us to use, and we're so grateful. So a very special thank you to their music director, Dr. Matthew Thompson, for setting it up, and their director of technology, Paul Catelli, who is making virtual magic happen as we speak. All of this is going on is because he knows how to make it happen, and we're so grateful. With me today are members of KC Baroque, Monty Carter on violin, who happens to be my husband, our good friend Jolt Ader on violin, good friend Brendan Pearson on viola, and longtime friend Nick Good on harpsichord. Great, we're all so happy to be here for you and share with you some of the things that we really love about this music. We specialize in playing music of the Baroque era, hence KC Baroque, huh? Who knows the dates of the Baroque era? Do you have an idea? How long ago was it? Yeah, it was about 350, 400 years ago. It was a long time ago. So between 1600 and 1750, we consider that music all belonging to a particular era, the Baroque era. Other composers from this period that you may recognize: Johann Sebastian Bach, Handel, Vivaldi, the Vivaldi Four Seasons, of course, Lully, and of course, Arcangelo Corelli, who is our featured composer today. And we can't wait to share more from this piece with you today. The instruments in the Baroque era look very much like ours that we would play today, but there have been some subtle but very significant changes to the instrument over time. These instruments we are playing today are much as they might have been in the Baroque era. They are either from the period or close to it, or are modern instruments adapted to the Baroque style and are made specifically as they would have been in the Baroque period. So Brendan plays a modern viola adapted to the Baroque setup. My cello was built in 1836. So the Baroque period ended in 1750. So this is a little bit later, but not many cellos survived the Baroque era. So when we can get kind of close to the Baroque era, we're pretty happy about that. It's a particularly beautiful instrument, and I'm so grateful to have it. Jolt plays a modern replica of a Baroque instrument. So this was made in 2007, but specifically made to the specifications of a Baroque instrument as it would have been built in the Baroque era. And Monty's violin actually dates from the Baroque era, 1740. Just barely makes it into the Baroque era, but another beautiful instrument to get to play. Now, Nick also plays a string instrument, but of a very different sort. He plays a harpsichord. It's a brand new baby, born this year, 2020, but it is built in the style of a Venetian instrument that's from Italy, from 1540. 1540. That actually predates the Baroque era by a little bit, about 60 years. Not unusual for an instrument like this to be used throughout the Baroque era as well. So I'm going to bring Monty over to the microphone. He's going to give you a little rundown on what we mean by a Baroque setup. What does that involve?
Well, in a lot of ways, it involves less. Yeah. No shoulder pad. That's okay. I've got a shoulder. Yeah. No chin rest. What? Oh, I've got plenty of chin. So we're okay. Yeah. Isn't that wonderful that we all play instruments that are from nature? Oh my gosh, all this beautiful wood of our instruments and yours. Maple, spruce, ebony often, Pernambuco with a bit of a very generous horse's tail put on it so that we can use it to to sing through our instrument. By scraping, metal strings, nope. Intestines, yeah. Sheep and ram. If you've heard of catgut, rest assured we have never done that. But ram and sheep who have lived a full life and checked off the box on their driver's license of wanting to donate their organs to the arts, we use those. That's what they used in the Baroque era. So, oh my gosh, I think pipes, the throat, is the only instrument that's more organic than what we play.
I should have warned you, he's just a little goofy. Jules going to come up now and talk a little bit about the bow, which is quite different from the modern bow.
All right, so this is my Baroque bow here, and you'll probably notice that it's a little bit shorter. It's a smaller version of the modern bow, and also it's very pointy at the end, right? So one of the things this does really well, I get a lot of power and sound and strength in the lower half of the bow, and then as I get to the tip, all that energy releases. So I don't have a strong tip of the bow, but it creates a really nice sound. So here's the basic type of sound I can make with this bow. Really feels like I'm exhaling, I'm breathing air out, and this is sort of the fundamental way we produce sound in Baroque music. So that when they changed the bow to what it looks like today, the modern bow is different because it can really sustain the sound. You can really keep a strong sound all the way from the frock to the tip, right? Because that's what the music called for in later times. So in Baroque music, it's different.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to explore this idea that the instruments are actually revealing to us how Baroque music should sound and should be played. The instruments, the bows, the strings, they tell us what it should sound like and what is natural for these instruments in the sound, and this helps us in our interpretation of Baroque music. Now let's hear from Nick. Nick has some interesting things to tell us about this piano-like instrument.
Thanks, Trilla. The piano-like instrument is a harpsichord, and a piano was something that was invented just at the very end of the Baroque era. So for about 250 years before that, the main keyboard instrument was the harpsichord. And the harpsichord is a plucking instrument. In a way, we could think of it as a guitar or a lute that has a keyboard attached to it. And instead of just having 6 strings or 12 strings, it's got about 60 strings on it, one for each key. The way it works is it's actually a very simple device. There's a little stick inside, it's called a jack, that points straight up, and when you press the key down, that jack moves up in the air a little bit, and sticking out of the jack is a little quill, a little piece cut off from a bird feather. And that quill plucks the string, and then there's a little spring in there so it backs out of the way and doesn't hit the string a second time when it falls back down. And so and then there's a little felt that stops the string from singing once we're ready to stop that sound. So that's the way the instrument works. Usually in the Baroque period, that was a period where there were lots of fancy decorations on the furniture, on the rooms, and usually on the musical instruments as well. Now this instrument here does not have a lot of fancy decoration on it, but it does have one detail that's interesting. And you can see the rose there in the center of the soundboard. This was made by an artist in Italy who cut parchments, 7 layers of parchment, cut them very finely with an X-Acto knife, and then laid them all together to make a 3-dimensional rose object. So that's the basics of how this instrument works. I'll play you just a quick snatch of music to give you a sense of what it sounds like.
Isn't that a lovely sound? It's a really special soundscape, isn't it? It takes us, as if it takes us back in time. It really, truly does. It's a very different sound than we would normally encounter in our daily lives. Our days are quite noisy in the 21st century. This was a much quieter time, and the sound of these instruments, I think, is very much a window into the experience of living in that time. Let's take just a moment and compare modern sound to Baroque sound. Monty has, we'll get there. Monty has brought his modern violin as well as his Baroque violin. And I just want you to hear side by side this 20th century sound versus the 17th century sound.
This is my modern violin, everybody. His name is Solo. He's not named after Han. He's ready to play a solo anytime, whether I am or not. And my Baroque violin is Jake, which seems rather trite for an instrument his age and heritage. But I call him Jake because his maker is Jacob, or Jakob Weiss from Austria. Let's see, so she wants me to play something on both instruments? I think I'll do it one at a time, yeah. What should I play? Oh, look how pretty. 'Tis the season, right? You know you're going to hear a difference of tone, but you're also going to hear a difference of pitch? What? I'm going to do the same thing on this violin. Apparently I feel swingy as well as holiday-ish.
That gives you a really clear sense of the intensity and brightness of the modern instrument in our modern world, also built to fill a huge room versus the Baroque instruments, which were often played in a small room in a palace with tile floors and plaster walls, where the room became the resonating box for these much quieter instruments with their gut strings and Baroque bows. Really fun. Our dear friend Brendan has some wonderful insights about Baroque music and what makes it really special and very unique, and I want him to come and share those ideas with you.
There are a lot of things to love about Baroque music, but one of my favorite things is that it's very affective. In other words, it's very good at communicating and even creating emotion. One of the best ways that it does this is through a use of a great deal of dramatic content, excuse me. What is the word? My brain is like fried. Contrast. Contrast. A lot of contrast. So we see a lot of instances of very sudden dynamic changes. You also see especially a lot of contrast in musical texture and musical color. For instance, there are a lot of passages of notes going very fast and furious, flying by, and it invokes a feeling of excitement or even rage and fire. And then you also have these very horizontal, very light textures that are so delicate they seem to just float on air. And another expressive tool that you'll hear quite a bit in Baroque era music is you'll hear notes from chords come in early or hang on late. And this creates these irresistible moments of harmonic tension that have a wonderful, peaceful release and resolution. And this gives us an overall feeling of very natural and organic beauty and peacefulness. And all of these things are accomplished and much more while still being very elegant and formal, yet at the same time being very personal and approachable.
It's just beautifully said. Thank you, Brendan. I have to find myself on my page here. One of the really rewarding things that we get to do is play concerts together and play them in beautiful spaces all around Kansas City. And Country Club Christian Church, where we are today, is truly a very special place to be, and we're so glad to get to share a little bit about this place with you. For instance, in 2021, just around the corner, this church building will turn 100 years old, and they'll be celebrating this century-old building. The architectural style here is English Gothic. It's a style that originated in the 12th century. Any idea how long how's your math today? 12th century, 900 years ago, they began building these churches in this style. We see the impressive stone structure that reaches upward to the sky. We see the striking contrast of carved wooden arches here in the sanctuary. This Gothic architectural style originated in France in the mid-1100s. The first church built in this style was the Abbey of Saint-Denis, located near Paris, and it's still standing today. The Gothic style quickly spread to England, and we see it regain popularity 400 years later in the 18th and 19th century. This is in the Baroque era and leading into the classical era. Do you remember the news coverage, perhaps, from about a year and a half ago, in April of 2019, of the tragic fire at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris? This slide is of Notre Dame before the fire, and it is a stunning example of Gothic architecture. Here in Kansas City, there are many examples of churches using and incorporating these versions of Gothic style. So take a look around. You'll find some amazing buildings in this town. It feels very special to be in a beautiful historical building, and it is quite inspiring to play in these places and also to attend concerts in these places. When you first joined us today, you saw some beautiful pictures of this impressive building. The entryway has a close-up allowing us to see some remarkable little details carved into the stone. We see flowers, decorations, a face, a bird. These ornaments, of course, are not structural. They're details that add beauty and interest to the facade. We see these beautiful details everywhere we look in this building, around the windows, in the arches, and of course, the beautiful stained glass windows that we'll be sharing with you very shortly. This desire for ornamentation is a key component to Baroque music. So let's explore how Corelli incorporates ornamentation in his writing. He was an extremely influential composer of the Baroque era, and when we look at how he incorporates ornamentation into his works, we see that he sometimes writes it in, and yet other times leaves space for the performer to create their own ornaments as they go. Here's a picture of the first violin part of the Vivace. This is the piece we were playing when we began our session today. You see on the top line, he's written it out exactly as he wants it to be played, complete with all the ornamentations. Monty will play this for us. He's written and ornamented it with trills, but he's also ornamented the basic line in other ways. If we take away all the extra notes, we're left with a very simple melody. Here's line 2 with the simple melody circled. Monty? It's a nice enough melody. But listen what he does is when he starts to dress it up, we're going to add just the rhythmic component of his ornamentation. Beautiful. Now on the last line, we put it all together and you can hear all of the added trills and ornaments together. It's fun listening with very attuned ears to what we're thinking about, what we're talking about. In the next movement, an allegro, we see that he uses some written ornamentation, but a very simple rhythmic structure of the theme as well. And this allows the players an opportunity to toss in a flourish or a turn as they are so inspired. Here's the opening theme. Then he adds a little flourish, a busyness. Yeah. So that looks really fancy, doesn't it? But it's just simple. It's back and forth, very simple melody built in. This is just simply a written out ornamentation that he's using to engage the energy in the piece. We're going to play the allegro for you now. Listen for all the improvised ornaments that get snuck in by our players as we go along. They're not in the music, but they're in our players' minds. Let's go straight through.
Just make sure they're ready. They go by quick, those little ornaments, but they sure are fun to slide in. Super fun. One of the most beautiful windows here in the church is the window in the balcony, just behind where you would be sitting if you were here. This window, it's just simply gorgeous.
This depicts Saint Cecilia, who is the patron saint of music. How perfect is that? She's honored with many musical works written about her, poetry, paintings, and many stained glass windows around the world. This is just a stunning window depicting her sitting at a small organ. It is one of the first stained glass windows that the church installed after it was built. There are lots of ornamental features to discover in this window. We're going to play the final movement of the concerto, the Pastoral. We'll let you explore the window a little bit. We'll show you a few others in the building and some other interesting features here in the sanctuary, and then we'll come back and have time for some Q&A with you. Please enjoy. Thank you. Isn't that beautiful? That Pastoral comes from this Christmas concerto, and it depicts the sheep and the shepherds crossing the countryside to go to see the Christ child after it was born. So it's a wonderful little tie-in with our Christmas season. Questions and answers.
Okay, every field trip, this hour, they win the question. every single Friday.
He told us that was going to happen.
Yeah. What's that? Yeah, these are 7th graders. And their questions are very insightful. So we're going to have to do rapid fire.
Okay.
Because we have a list.
Okay.
First, here's the reactions. You just need to know what they're saying. Sounds like something that would play in a castle. And yeah, that's actually correct. When you did the second song, somebody just put, it's a lower pitch immediately in the chat. This is really cool. Amazing. Whoa. Those are the reactions. All capital letters. Good stuff. All right, here we go. Why?
Really getting under my mask.
Yeah, me too. I like this question because they've noticed the length of the bows. You've talked about the length of the bows, but we've never had this question. Why did the bows get longer?
I'm just going to jump right in. One
Yeah.
of my favorite topics. So we have these eras in music. We have the Baroque era, we have the classical era, we have the Romantic era, we have the Impressionist period at the turn of the 20th century. All of those periods are retro. We're looking back on those time periods and we're saying, look at how the philosophy of the day, the economics of the day, the artwork, the sculpture, the architecture, and the music all kind of fits into a general idea or a general approach to their expression. Well, as those eras changed, these were driven by the artists, by the philosophers, by the musicians. So let's take, for instance, Mozart came along near the end of the Baroque era. He heard a new kind of sound. He wanted a new kind of writing to happen, a new kind of interpretation using these notes. Well, it required a different kind of sound. So I can imagine all the musicians coming to rehearsal with Mozart, and he's saying, oh, I need more, sustain more, I need more accent, I need a brighter sound. And they're like, oh, we're doing the best we can. So they went back to the makers and they said, we need something louder, we need something stronger, and we need something that sustains more. So the makers went back and started exploring and experimenting. What can we do to make these more effective, to meet the needs of these new conductors? So as each era develops, new requirements are being asked of us as players. And so we've gone back to the makers and said, help us make this happen. So the bows got longer, they got higher tips, more sustained, more powerful. Some structural things changed. So all of those are in response to the artistic drive of the eras.
Excellent. We have two harpsichord-related questions. The first is, why is the harpsichord positioned in the middle the way it is? And the second question is, why are the keys yellow?
The instrument is positioned the way it is today just because that was an arrangement that worked out for this group of musicians. Sometimes we put it in the back of the string players. Sometimes we put it to the side. I always like to be real close to the cello player because oftentimes the cello and the harpsichord do things that are very closely related to each other. And but it's flexible where we put it. There are lots of different positions. The instruments the keys are yellow because that was the wood that the builder chose to use for making this instrument. I have a harpsichord at home that has black keys instead of white keys, and then it has white accidentals where normally you would expect black keys to be. So lots of harpsichords are different depending on what wood gets used for the keys.
So are the keys solid carved wood?
Yes, no. They're a poplar underneath, and then it's a veneer that's laid on top of it.
Okay.
So it used to be sometimes it would be ivory, or one of my harpsichords at home has bone that has been laid on top of the keys.
So is the weight similar between a piano and a harpsichord to the key?
The keys are much lighter on a harpsichord, and
Okay.
they feel lighter when you play them.
Okay. Oh, hold on. We do have one more. Maybe two. I tried to put them in order, but I may have missed. Why is it so long? And then and the other one related to that. Why is it so skinny? So they were noticing it was very narrow, but also very long.
Okay. It's skinny because it doesn't have nearly as many keys as a piano would. A piano would have 88 keys on it. This one has about 48 keys on it, so it doesn't need to be as thick. And it is as long as it is because that string to make the bottom note has to be that long in order to vibrate the way that it needs to vibrate.
Okay. Thank you. Did the cello always have an end pin during Baroque times?
Good question. We didn't even mention that.
I told you they win.
I know. You guys win. You win the prize today. Originally, no, the cello did not have an end pin. However, it was not unusual, especially for women that played the cello. If you can imagine, back in the 1600s and 1700s, you know, they wore these big gowns, super big with a ton of crinoline underneath to hold out this big skirt, but yet they were supposed to be playing the cello so elegantly and daintily. So they often used a small stool, and so you probably can't see. So I use just a small, short stool to lift it off the floor. Many Baroque cellists can hold it between their knees. If you've got long, skinny legs, you can do that. I like it in the 16th style women's little, and this, by the way, came from Pottery Barn. It's a cheese board, and it works perfectly. It's a period cheese board.
They're curious, this is going to be a quick question. Do you know what kind of bone the keys are made out of when they're made out of bone on a harpsichord?
Oftentimes cow.
Okay. He said cow bones. Probably because, you know, they're big animals, big bones. All right. Do you only perform in Christian churches? And the kid says, hey, I'm Christian, but, you know, just curious, is this a religious thing, or is this, where do you play?
We play everywhere. We play outside. We don't like playing outside because the weather and our gut strings don't get along very well. But we play, a lot of times we do play in churches simply because the churches often make their space available to us for a very reasonable fee. We don't have to pay an expensive venue fee for performing there. But we play everywhere. Mostly we're looking for beautiful places. Historic buildings are nice because it reflects the historic approach to music making that we are doing. And many of the churches have art is important to many of the churches, and so there's an investment already in the artistic environment, and this is very inspiring to us. So it just happens that we perform a lot in church, but not always. Libraries.
There you go.
Yeah, and just general concert halls as well. So
Very good. All right, I think we can, if we have time for two more, that'll get all of the questions we had. Somebody says, this sounds like a different string. Is it because it's gut? Does that explain the difference in tone? Yes. Okay, good question. Also, probably the tuning would have something to do with that too. That
That's
it's
right,
a
the
lower
fact that
pitch.
we're a lower pitch, but the gut string has a very warm, slightly fuzzier texture in comparison to the steel strings. So it's a combination of both of those, and the bow.
And it's beautiful. I mean, just beautiful. So with a Baroque bow, do you need to change your bow hold as compared to a modern bow? Looks like there's a lot of wrist action.
I'm hogging all the answers. Yes, so we choke up on the bow. It's a little higher from the frog than you do in modern playing, and it's closer to the balance point, so this allows us more lightness, which is really important for the gut strings. They respond beautifully to a very, very light very, very light touch. So there's a slightly different bow hold, a little bit of adjustment to make there, but once you feel that at home, it's second nature.
On behalf of Mr. Wiebe and Ms. Cook and myself, we want to say thank you again for sharing this with us today. It was phenomenal. It was just beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, guys, I'm going to jump over to WebEx now, okay?